As of the filming of this video, I've read 71 books. Not quite my goal of 100. Hey there, creepy peeps. My name is Maven. Welcome back to my channel. And as you can tell from the title of this video, I'm going to be talking about my favorite books that I read in 2022. I may not have reached my reading goal of 100 books. It's fine. It's all about quality over quantity anyway. But one thing I did do better than I have done in the past couple of years is have a better ratio of like new releases to older books. Normally, I'm like many of you probably, where I buy the books, let them sit on my shelf for 1 or 2 years, and then finally get to them. For length purposes on this video, I'm going to keep it to like horror, thriller, spooky adjacent books only. If you follow the link tree in the description, you can find the link to my story graph, which is where I track my books, and you can see everything I've read this year, because there's quite a few books that fall outside of these scarier genres that I also thought were amazing and were some of my favorite books I read this year. I'm also going to break this list into 2 sections. I'll give you my top 5 for each category. So I'm going to start with my top 5 favorite new releases I read this year. So these are books that came out this year in 2022. And then the other 5 will be backlist titles that I read for the first time this year. All right, so let's begin with the new releases. So number 5 for me is Just Like Mother by Anne Heltzel. It follows Maeve, who is a childhood survivor of this cult, and she reconnects with her sister, Andrea, as an adult. She comes to find that Andrea has made her fortune in the fertility industry, and the more Maeve reconnects with Andrea and more time she spends with her, the more Andrea's lifestyle triggers harmful and scary memories for Maeve. Without saying too much, the cult vibes in this book all have to do with motherhood. I mean, you can probably tell from the title, but also just to give a content warning, I would definitely look up content warnings for this book before you read it, because the vibes of the cult and Andrea's like fertility business that she runs are very turfy. It's why they're so horrifying, and Maeve is not interested in that at all, given her upbringing in the cult, which is completely understandable. So this book made me squirm many times as somebody who is completely uninterested in birthing children from my body. But this book explores trauma in a super realistic way. I sometimes feel like books and movies kind of like beautify trauma a little bit and like make it an aesthetic. This book shows some of the not so pretty sides of trauma, and I appreciated that a lot. Just once again, definitely check your content warnings for this book in particular. All right, number 4 for me for new releases is Hide by Kiersten White. This follows Mac, who enters into an extreme game of hide and seek that is held at an abandoned amusement park to win a life-changing amount of prize money. As expected, it's not just a large game of hide and seek for prize money. There's something else way more sinister going on here. This was one of the funnest Creepy Book Club discussions that I think we've had so far since I've started the live stream discussions. It's a relatively straightforward story, even with the twist, I do have to say, but it was a fun read, and it was fun discussion material, even just on the surface of like, you know, talking about what you would do in that situation or how long you think you would last in this game of hide and seek. I think it's been pretty apparent on this channel that I do have a soft spot, have a little bit of a love for a gimmicky horror premise, especially when you take something like an innocent childhood game and make it terrifying. And I do have to commend the characters in this book. They are so well written. Even the minor characters, like you get just enough information about them to care about them, and that makes it more intense as they start getting picked off. It's a little bit of a quicker read, I think, compared to some of the other ones I have on this list, and I would highly recommend it. All right, number 3 for new releases for me is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. As expected of me, this is a retelling of the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher. We follow a genderqueer protagonist, Easton, who is traveling to their old friend Madeline and Roderick's house at Madeline's request because her brother thinks she's dying. So Easton is going out to figure out what the heck is going on, and when they show up, they see the state of the house and the state of the siblings. and try to get to the bottom of what's going on. I thought this was a really well done novella. It was so full of rich backstory for Easton, and yet this story still moved along at a quick pace. Like, it's not a long book. I genuinely found so many of the characters to be lovable, including Easton's horse, which we all agreed during the Creepy Book Club discussion that Easton's horse was the best character. The cover kind of hints at what's going on. You know, looking at it, I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I have some hints of what's going to be the major players here. I had no idea what the ultimate result of this book was going to be. It is grotesque, it is uncomfy, and there were some genuinely terrifying scenes in this book that I am still thinking about. And number 2 for new releases for me is The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. We're following 2 characters in this one. The first one is Beatriz, who is the new wife of Don Rodolfo, who has just moved into her new home, San Isidro, which is a cold and terribly haunted estate. Beatriz enlists the help of Padre Andres to exorcise whatever it is that is terrorizing her in the house. I've never been more scared of a fictional home in my life. Honestly, I can tell you right now, I would not last a single night in San Isidro. I do love a haunted house story though, where the actual house is like its own character without giving too much away. Even when the problem with San Isidro is solved, the Hacienda still has a personality, if you will, and I love that. I think it very much acknowledges the fact that buildings usually have a feel, a vibe to them, a personality, whether it's malicious or not, and I think this book does really well in acknowledging that. And even though Beatriz is the main character for the book, honestly, my favorite chapters were from Andres, who is, I'm just going to use the term witch here for all intents and purposes, hiding in priest clothing. The mixture of these 2 practices was really interesting to see, and it was a refreshing change from your typical like Americanized haunted house story where it's a Catholic priest that has to come in and save the day, and that's the only thing that's gonna save the house, you know? And finally, my favorite 2022 release this year is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. So we're following Claire, who is the captain of a repair crew who pick up a distress signal from a ship that has been lost in space for decades. So the crew go to the signal, board the ship, and unfortunately find what made the ship go missing for so many years. This is like Ghost Ship meets Event Horizon. It is so scary. Even though this takes place in space, I kind of still felt a little bit of my fear, and I know this is a fear a lot of people have, of large objects in water. It's got a name. I can't pronounce it. I'm gonna put it on the screen here. I don't know if there is a name for fear of like large objects or large creatures in space, but I may also have that. I also listened to this book on audiobook, and I have to mention it and commend the narrator, Lauren Ezzo, who did an amazing job. I have never heard somebody read scary scenes the way she did. Like, it got me worked up, like how she was portraying the scary scenes in her voice. And yeah, you just have to listen to it to understand, but she was absolutely freaking me out with the way she was reading the book, and that added to the experience. I would highly recommend the audiobook. I know this is already a long video, but let's get into my top 5 backlist titles I read this year. So these are older books that I just happened to read for the first time in 2022. So coming in at number 5 for the backlist titles is The Gilda Stories by Jewel Gomez. This book is a series of, well, stories from the life of Gilda, just me explaining the title, who is turned into a vampire after escaping a plantation in Louisiana. So we see moments of her immortal life throughout time and seeing her come to terms with her immortality, her sexuality, her empowerment through all these important moments in her life. It's a powerful book that I'm still thinking about, even though we read it, I think, in February for Creepy Book Club. Just be prepared, this isn't your typical like 3-act narrative structure, but rather a series of vignettes in this immortal life of a Black lesbian vampire. Being completely predictable here, number 4 is another lesbian vampire tale, Carmilla. I read this for the first time with a creepy book club, and it was another fantastic discussion. I would highly recommend going back and watching it. I'll link the playlist for creepy book club up here. And I feel like maybe most of us might be familiar with the story to some respect, but it is told in retrospect from Laura, whose father takes in a young girl, Carmilla, who happens to be a vampire. It's pretty straightforward, but not straight. It was a quick read, but really important for me to finally read, seeing as lesbian vampire stories are some of my favorite to watch in the horror genre. So finally getting to the original source material and reading a little bit about the history of this story was awesome. It gave me great perspective. If you do want to pick this up, I would highly recommend the one that I have here that's edited by Carmen Maria Machado. The introduction that she has written to this book is fascinating. Coming in at number 3 for the backlist titles for me is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon by Stephen King. I got so many comments to stop doing the Stephen King videos this year. I kept criticizing a lot of his books and it just seemed like I wasn't having a good time, and I understand some of the criticism, but I feel like some of those people like just straight up ignored the videos where I talked about books I legitimately liked from him. Way back when I asked y'all for Stephen King recommendations, like what books I should read, there's like every other comment was talking about this book. I just knew nothing about it. But The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon follows Trisha, who is a 9-year-old girl who gets lost in the woods on the Appalachian Trail. It is subtle at times in its scariness, and to me, just being lost in the woods like that is fucking terrifying, let alone thinking that someone or something is stalking you. Simple can sometimes be the most effective method, and it really worked for this book. It was quite subtle given some of the other Stephen King books that I've read where he is just really rich in detail, sometimes to a fault. Nice to see him be a little more sparse with his writing here and just let the situation, for the most part, take over in the scariness. It was a really good read. I can see why a bunch of y'all recommended it because it was obviously an underrated pick, so thank you. So coming in at number 2 for me for the backlist is They Never Learn by Lane Fargo. I'm realizing now that the last 2 books I picked for the backlist titles are like the worst because I can't really talk about them because of spoilers. I'll do my best though. They Never Learn follows 2 characters, Carly and Scarlett. Carly being a new student at Gorman University, and Scarlett, a professor who is not only a successful educator, but a successful serial killer. Her victims always being men that take advantage of women. Meanwhile, Carly is grappling with her own maybe murderous emotions when her roommate is sexually assaulted at a party. So if you have a problem with men, this is the book. That's how it was sold to me on TikTok, so I feel like I should sell it to you that way too. I absolutely loved the ending of this book. I can't tell you why because it'll give everything away, but I will happily talk about why in the comments maybe, so I can at least give a good like spoiler warning so people can avoid it. This is also one of the best uses of a dual POV that I've ever seen. I also can't say why. I've already talked about this book a million times now and you guys are probably tired of hearing about it. And I'm just gonna keep talking about it because it's our creepy book club pick for December. But my number 1 spot for the backlist and this entire list, like my favorite book that I've read all year this year, is The Last House on Needless Street by Katrina Ward. So on the surface, the summary would seem that we're following a woman who has just moved on to Needless Street specifically because of her new neighbor who she suspects kidnapped and murdered her sister when she was a child. So following the suspected serial killer, a young girl who is not allowed outside, and a cat who likes to read the Bible. I cannot tell you any more than that, but the twist, oh my God, I'm still thinking about it. It floored me. It's one of those stories that I wish I could, you know, do the neuralizer thing from Men in Black and just erase my memory and then just keep rereading this book over and over again. This book will absolutely poke at and or reveal any biases you may have because of the horror genre. And I can't explain what that means more specifically. I really can't wait to talk about it at Creepy Book Club so I can just talk freely, you know, not worrying about giving away spoilers. But I'm obviously still thinking about this book. I obviously still just want to keep talking about this book. The amount of people I've sold this to at work, because I'm like, just read it. Trying to get as many people to read this as humanly possible. This is my Bible and I'm spreading the gospel. It's the best book I read this entire year. So please share what your favorite books were in the comments so I can see what your top 10, top 5, top whatever were. And if you're on Storygraph, follow me or drop your username in the comments so I can follow you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here. Become a Creepy Peep today. I post 2 new videos every week. Always horror related, all of the time, 24/7, 365. So I'll see you later this week with a new video. Until then, stay strange. Bye.